Welcome to the first lesson in the Chess on Ice Basic Strategy course. This series is designed to take you from having never skipped or thought much about curling strategy to being able to skip a game with confidence. Each lesson will build on the last, slowly increasing your curling strategy knowledge until you have everything you need to be an effective club or bonspiel skip. For our first lesson, we're going to start with the basics. That means going over the three basic types of shots: draws, guards, and hits, and talking about why and when we want to use each of them. While this might feel a bit elementary, it forms the basis for everything else we'll be talking about in this series. As you know, there are lots of shot types in curling. However, we can classify them in three basic groups: draws, which are shots that are thrown to land in the house; guards, which are used to protect what sits behind them, either rocks or an area of the house; and hits, which are shots that are thrown to remove one or more rocks from play. Each of these shot types has a very different strategic purpose for us as we play out an end. Let's take a deeper look at each one, talking about how they can help us or hurt us as we try to win games. First, let's dive into draws. Draws are the bread and butter of curling. Most of the time, if you're going to throw a shot with the intention of it scoring a point for you, your call's going to be a draw. Draws are also the most versatile of the shot types we'll talk about today. The majority of time, you'll probably be throwing draws with offensive play in mind. That is, with the intention of scoring more points. However, you can also throw some draws to play defense, out counting several of your opponent's rocks without necessarily counting yourself, or throwing more difficult shots like freezes that might not count, but will make it very difficult for the other team to play for a big end themselves. Unlike the other two shot types we'll talk about later, draws aren't inherently offensive or defensive, nor are they consistently aggressive or conservative. Instead, draws are a part of almost every game plan, with the only exception perhaps being when you have a huge lead late in the game. Generally speaking, if you're winning, you'll be starting your ends with draws. If your opponent opens with a center guard, you'll probably throw around it, unless you're losing pretty badly. And whenever you feel like you're in a safe position and just want to score, or threaten to score, more points, a draw, ideally around the guard, is the best way to do that. In other words, almost every end you play will feature your team throwing at least a handful of draws. That's not so true of the other two shot types we're going to be talking about in this video. Next up, let's talk about guards. One of the most counterintuitive concepts for new curlers is what constitutes aggressive or defensive play. While guards may feel like the safest and easiest shots to throw, they're actually about the most aggressive thing you can do on the sheet. The purpose of a guard is to set up an area where a rock can hide. Sometimes a rock is already there, and you're throwing a guard to protect it. Other times, you may put up a guard with the intention of attacking that part of the ice later. Either way, a guard is thrown with the intention of protecting something. And while guards themselves can't score points directly, they have the power to create big ends, unlike any other shots in curling. Why is that? Well, one draw is usually only responsible for scoring 1 point itself. However, a guard can create a hiding spot for many rocks. In theory, one guard could be drawn around 7 times, meaning that if that guard stays there and effectively protects those rocks, it essentially was responsible for a 7-point end. Be aware, however, that guards can be used by either team, regardless of what color they are. That means that guards promote scoring for both teams, as they make it harder to get rid of rocks later in the end. As a result, we generally want to throw guards when we're willing to play aggressively to score points, while taking the risk of giving up more points at the same time. We'll do this when we're losing and need to score several points with a hammer, or steal without it. Or if we're a generally aggressive team that would prefer to play a draw game to one where open hits are available. Finally, let's talk about hits. While guards are the way to generate offense in curling, hits are the more effective way to play defense. Hits remove rocks, and when rocks aren't in play, they can't score. Plain and simple. When we're winning, we're usually happy to hit open rocks. Even if that won't help us score, it'll prevent our opponents from getting too many points. However, there's another way to use hits that is often overlooked by new skips. while it doesn't immediately make you count or eliminate an opponent's rock, peeling guards is very important as a way to get out of trouble, or prevent trouble you're already in from getting worse. Remember the earlier example when we said that a guard could potentially help you score 7 points if you kept drawing behind it? That's only possible because of the guard. When you're winning, you might want to consider peeling your opponent's guards before things get out of control, so that you have access to hitting their rocks in the house later. Or, at the very least, you can force them to throw the guard again, stopping them from making the situation any worse. When you have a big lead, you may want to do little more than throw hit after hit. At that point, there's no need to score more points, and certainly no reason to leave guards up that your opponents can use. Instead, you'll try to make as many hits as you can. Even if you miss a couple, you're likely to do enough damage to prevent a big end from occurring. That's not to say that hits are always defensive or conservative. Particularly during skip rocks, hits can be used to finish off a big end, by eliminating our opponent's only rock or rocks remaining in the house. There are also times where a good hit is the only way to score on your last rock. In general, hits that are being used in a more offensive manner are usually thrown more lightly than those that are purely defensive. This makes some sense. A lighter rock is more likely to stick around in the house if it rolls a bit, while a heavier rock is all but sure to remove what you're hitting from the house. Alright, that should give you a very basic overview of the use cases for the 3 main kinds of shots in curling. In fact, if this is all you knew about curling strategy, you could probably call a reasonable game in a casual league night at your club. You might make a few strange calls, there's still a lot of ground to cover, but you'll have the general idea of how to use draws, guards, and hits effectively, depending on how the end is going. Thanks for watching the first video in my basic strategy course. I'll be posting more of these videos soon, and if they're already up, you can keep going with the course by following the playlist I'll create for this series. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to get notified each time I post new content. If you want to support Chess on Ice, check out my Patreon. Backers get their names at the end of my videos, receive access to exclusive videos each month, and get more perks. You can find a link to the Patreon in the description to this video below. Thanks again for watching, and good curling!